It is one of the rarest of all comic books, Action Comics #1. It was 10 cents back in 1938, now it's worth more than $1 million. The man told detectives he found it in a storage locker like this one.
You won't believe some of the things that people have found in storage units. From rare items to movie memorabilia and more, there's a lot that can be found if you're lucky enough. Allow me to show you some of them. 8. The first ever Superman comic. With a twist. Let's start off with a storage unit story that is actually a bit well known. In the world of comic books, there are certain heroes who have been around for a very long time. Superman himself was actually the start of what we call the superhero genre. And Action Comics #1 was the first comic to feature Superman, which obviously makes it one of, if not the, most valuable comic in the world. But because no one knew at the time that Superman would soon be a worldwide icon, not many mint copies exist. And that's where the story of this entry begins, as the one and only Nicolas Cage, who was actually going to be a live-action Superman once, bought a very good condition Action Comics #1 in 1997 for about $150,000. A steal at the time, trust me. Fast forward to 3 years later, his Los Angeles home was broken into, and his massive comic book collection, including the Superman comic in question, was taken by the thieves. For the record, that's a low blow in the worst way. Moving on to 11 years later, a man bought a storage unit in California and found the comic. But here's the biggest twist of all. The guy who sold Nick Cage that Action Comics #1 was the guy who bought the storage unit. You can't make this up. After finding out that Cage was the rightful owner, he returned the comic to him. Sadly, this was the point in time where Cage had been going through some money issues, so he had to auction off the comic. But he cleaned up pretty well, as he made $2.1 million off the sale. Not bad for a single comic, huh? I'll bet you'll treasure your collection a lot more now. 7. Faceless cash. Okay, let's talk about one of the worst case scenarios for a storage unit find. You think you hit the jackpot on something, and then you think you didn't because you noticed something wrong. But then you find out that everything is okay because of a technicality. Confused? I'll explain. A guy buys a storage unit, okay? He spends $400 on it. When he looks inside, he finds out that there's $24,000 in cash. Say it with me. Ka-ching! But then he looks at the money in more detail, and he finds out that the money has all the faces from the presidents and various historical figures cut out of them. So you'd think that they would be useless because they're deformed, but you would be wrong. The US Treasury has a rule. If you are able to show the serial numbers on the cash you have, they'll accept the money. No joke, no lie. So that guy made a $23,600 profit on that storage unit at minimum. After all, we don't know what he found outside of the cash, but that was definitely the biggest thing. 6. The Michael Jackson collection. You might not believe it at first, but celebrities are just as inclined to buy storage units and put in stuff they don't use or want to keep in their house. As one such legend who did just that was the late Michael Jackson. He had one in Culver City, California, and one day it defaulted in payments. After his passing, obviously. And when the owners of the storage place opened it up, they were in for quite a surprise. For Michael Jackson put a lot of personal items in there, including some of the costumes that he wore on stage, some prints of the King of Pop, and even a full trunk of his belongings. Oh, but it gets even better. In another storage unit owned by Jackson, a person found songs recorded by him that were never officially released. How does that happen? Well, it's because he was between record label deals when he came up with the inspiration for the songs, and so he just wrote them down. Some of them actually did get recorded though, including some with Tina Turner. But because the songs weren't under any record label, no one could claim them until they went up for auction. The people on both sides of this were stunned to find such pristine memorabilia, and it goes to show you that even someone like Michael Jackson had to put his stuff somewhere. 5. Classic video games. On Storage Wars, how many of these shows were out in their prime? A person bought a unit and found a massive collection of video games. Now, while this may not sound like an impressive thing, the video games they found were from the first generation of titles. We're talking Atari games here, and some systems too. Plus, they were all in mint condition. Why does that matter? Here's the thing. When Atari was at its prime in the early 80s, everyone wanted one. But then the gaming crash of 1983 happened, and everyone started to throw their video games and consoles away. Because of this, there aren't many mint condition Atari titles out there. And so this guy finding that many in good condition? Jackpot. In fact, he made around $50,000 for the games, which he called one of his best finds ever.
You got some really mint games. This is one of the best lots I've ever seen that came through the front door.
Really?
I like that, and that's man. At 15 years.
4. The Burt Reynolds Collection. As I have already shown, celebrities use storage units just like regular people. But for Burt Reynolds, it's a different story, and a very weird one at that. For he did get a storage unit, and he did fill it with a lot of stuff, but it was stuff that was all part of him in one way or another, which you would think would be okay. After all, it's his unit. But you see, Mr. Reynolds decided to keep a lot of unique, odd, and just plain weird items in his storage unit, which someone bought and got to explore. And oh, what a journey they must have had going through all this stuff. Now, to be fair, there wasn't all weird things here. Some clearly had great personal value to the late Mr. Reynolds, such as a horse carriage made by Dolly Parton, who had been in films with him over the years and was his friend. There were classic items like the canoe from the movie Deliverance, which is still respected to this day. But then the weird items showed up, like how there was a framed doctor's note talking about his spleen operation. Okay. There was also a proof of sale of a horse named Trigger. Why he kept that, only he could have answered that. To list all the items would take a long time, but the person who got this was smart in its use, because all the items were put into a museum in Jupiter, Florida. So if you're a Burt Reynolds fan, you should go down to the museum and check out his stuff.
Well, you know, all those pictures, Navajo Joe, they paid off, you know?
3. Michael Jordan recruitment letters. When you talk about the NBA, you think about the players that have made the game a legendary sport. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and of course, the one, the only, Michael Jordan, number 23, for most of his career anyway, was one of the best in the game. He won 6 titles, multiple MVPs, and had such skill that many back then and today consider him the greatest NBA player of all time. Take that, LeBron. But his journey truly started back in North Carolina, where he was a Tar Heel in college. And for a lucky man who bought a storage unit in college, he happened to find 2 very important letters that belonged to Michael Jordan. His recruitment letters to North Carolina. He had 2, in fact. One was from assistant Bill Guthridge, and another was from Coach Dean Smith. Anyone who knows his time at North Carolina knows that he wasn't a star at first, but then he had a massive growth spurt, and it improved his game emphatically. So his letters were worth a lot of money because of their historical value. How much value? Over $50,000. MJ for the win.
Michael Jordan at his best. There's very few people on this planet that can do this.
He's just simply amazing.
2. Gold and silver. You might think that some of the most valuable things you could find in a storage unit would never be found in a storage unit. You know, like silver and gold. You're singing the song in your head right now, aren't you? Anyway, you'd think that such rare items wouldn't be kept in a storage unit. But you would be wrong. It happens more than you think. In an episode of Action Hunters, Alan Half and Ton Jones found 14 small bars of gold hidden inside of a unit. And at the time, when compiled together, it was over $20,000 in value. But wait, that's not all. In San Jose, a man spent $1,100 on a unit. And as he rummaged around, he found a weird blue Rubbermaid container. Nothing wrong with that, right? Well, upon further inspection, he found an assortment of rare coins, gold, and silver ingots. When you tally up all the coins he had found and put the weight and value into conversion rates, he cleared over $500,000. Think about that. He bought one storage unit and made $500,000. I'm not making this up. But you see, because I'm not making it up, it makes me wonder what kind of person leaves $500,000 in a storage unit and doesn't make the payments. The best situation here is they passed away and their kin didn't know what was in the unit. But at worst, they forgot about it. And that's just wrong. No, seriously, it pains me that someone may be that stupid. 1. James Bond car. Cue James Bond music. If you look at TV and movies nowadays, you'll find that every single prop, costume, and other item associated with the production is kept under tight security to ensure that it doesn't get lost or taken by a wayward fan or crew member with sticky fingers. But back in the older days of movies, before there was eBay and other such services, not so much. Granted, they might not have needed some of the things that were on the set, but some of the items that have been found from old movies in storage units are insane, such as a legendary James Bond car. Oh yeah, it's for real. This all happened in 1989. A man in Long Island bought a unit and found an interesting white sports car inside. As he was driving home with the car in tow, fellow drivers let him know via radio that he was in possession of the submarine car featured in the classic James Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, of which is not only one of the most popular James Bond films ever, but that car was involved in several memorable scenes, including blowing up a potential Bond girl with a missile while she was in a helicopter. The kicker, though? He had never seen a James Bond film in his life. No wonder he didn't recognize it. As it turns out that this particular version of that car was one of 8 made for the film. No doubt because the cars kept getting damaged and thus they needed doubles for various scenes. The one he had was a promotion car. 7 of the 8 submarine cars from that movie were accounted for, which is actually pretty incredible. This was the one that wasn't. To this day, no one knows how it went from the promotion circuit to a storage unit in Long Island. But it did, and this guy made bank because of it in more ways than one. Want to know the best part? Elon Musk eventually bought it for $1 million. Yeah, that Elon Musk.
Can you swim?
Thanks for watching. Can you believe the things that these people have found in storage units? Which one was your favorite? Have you heard of another story that could have been on this list? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.